Hey everyone, welcome to Reddit Readout. Today we are checking out People of Reddit. Story 1. Never be an asshole to a really rich guy. I was reminded of this story from another post asking about things seen by the super rich. I worked at a marina where there were condos along the side. A client of ours talked to us about a slip directly in front of one vacant condo to keep his boat. It was a pretty tight-knit community and we talked to the guy renting that slip about moving to another and he had no problem. Great. Until the guy went to talk to the manager of the condos about the renting the vacant one. The manager of the condos was known for being a bit of a dick, but no one thought he would actively be one to this guy for no apparent reason. He said someone else was waiting for that particular condo and he could not have it. Well, this guy wanting to rent it would have normally had no issue with moving to one a bit further away from his boat, but apparently this manager was just a straight-up dickhead. I honestly forgot about it until about a month later when I saw him moving into the condo directly in front of his boat. I was a bit surprised and I asked my boss about it, figuring the manager finally gave in or the ones who reserved it backed out. Oh, but no. For the petty revenge. My boss tells me the guy was pissed. So he found out who the organization that owned the condos was, and bought the whole complex, then promptly firing the manager. I talked to him a few weeks later over beers and asked him about it. He said it was true. I asked him why he just didn't talk to the investment firm and get the guy fired. He said he was going to but still wanted the condo, and once going over the financials he realized he had a good return on investment. Plus he then had the opportunity to do upgrades he would not have been able to by renting. He was a really nice guy. I never imagined someone would go through all that just to spite an asshole, but there you are. Moral of the story is to never piss off a man with enough money and will to buy a whole company just to fire you. Story 2. Eggs at me, eggs for thee. Love this sub. I have a pretty good story that fits. So I was 14 at the time, way back in the mid-80s. A friend and I were biking to a local corner store when this pickup truck came cruising up behind us. All of a sudden I felt these sharp pains in my back, then my head. I was being pelted with eggs. My friend took a few hits too and actually crashed his bike. The truck cruised past us, with 2 older teens in the cab, and 2 more in the box, laughing at our plight and pelting more eggs at us. I recalled the truck being an off-white color and having some shitty repairs on the fender, with red primer paint, and part of the plate number. Fast forward about a week, I'm biking around in my neighborhood and spot a cream-colored truck in a driveway. Scope it out a bit, notice Bondo/primer on the fender. Plate matches up. Booyah! For about a year straight after that, myself and other various friends would randomly go and egg the fuck out of that truck and the house. I'd pool a few bucks, go buy a dozen or 2 eggs, then we'd launch a hit and run assault. Sometimes days in a row. Sometimes we'd take a week or so off, then do a massive attack just to keep them on their toes. I think about it all the time, after all these years. It was my most glorious and epic revenge. Story 3. Insult my mother, say goodbye to your parking spot. My neighbor is a grumpy old man. He was the first person living on this street and he treats the street as his private property, and he parks his car on the street in front of his house. Next to his house is an elementary school. Every morning parents are dropping off kids and they briefly stop their cars somewhere on our street to do so. Since this street is apparently ruled by my neighbor, he has put up no parking signs everywhere and screams at anyone who dares to defy his rules. I was tolerating this behavior since it did not affect me personally, not my business. However, at one point my mother came to visit. As she was walking past his house, the neighbor comes flying out of the house screaming insults, sending drops of saliva all over my mother. I think the neighbor thought that a car parked on the street in front of his house was hers, and when she said it was not her car, he accused her of not accepting responsibility, not respecting his authority, etc. It got so bad that other passers-by had to try calm him down before his threats would go from words to action. My mum said she has never been so insulted in her entire life. I decided that enough is enough. I petitioned to the authorities that the street was too narrow to allow two-way traffic with cars parked on the side. Shortly thereafter, the neighbors' no parking signs were gone, and they are replaced by one official one, meaning that the neighbor will be fined if he parks in front of his house. The neighbor has no garage or anywhere else to park his car. A very satisfying petty revenge. Story 4. Connor was not a nice guy. TW attempted essay. This happened back in the late 1980s. I was in HS and working PT at a family restaurant as a server. The restaurant was a great place to work and I made a lot of great friends working there. A new guy, Connor, gets hired and he is going to be driving in from a small town nearly 20 miles away to work a minimum wage job as a dishwasher. He is a senior at his small town high school, but it was odd that he was driving so far for this job. I worked a couple of evenings with Connor and he seemed okay, maybe a little full of himself at times but nothing too bad. Connor was not very tall, 5'6" to maybe 5'7", and he was pretty slim. And sometimes he seems to be trying to compensate since he was smaller in stature, but one of the older guys working evenings at the restaurant besides the managers. Well, after closing on the weekends, most of us high school kids go out to the only 24-hour restaurant in town, a truck stop out on the highway near my family's farm. I had ridden to work with my best friend, but I would usually let her and her BF, a cook at our restaurant, ride alone to the truck stop so they could have some alone time together. Connor offered to let me ride with him. He had a big oversized lifted pickup truck. I assumed other people would also ride with us, but it ended up being just the two of us in his big truck. Everything seemed normal. He did take this side road that not many people take, but it was a road I was very familiar with because my family often used it to avoid getting on the main highway with farm equipment or grain trucks going to the grain elevators, places where farmers buy and sell their grain and where grain is shipped out of either by semi-trucks or trains. Anyway, I can see the truck stop restaurant we are going to. It is only about a half-mile away, but on this side road there are some railroad tracks. Connor stops right on the tracks and turns off his truck. He turns to me and tells me that we are going to sit there until I have S*X with him or until a train comes and // us both. There is a problem with Connor's plan. These tracks are not on the main rail line. This is railroad spur where they park grain cars waiting to be filled or filled cars waiting to be added to an outbound train. I know this because my uncle works for the railroad and he has taken me around and shown me all this and more. So I pretend that I am going to do what Connor wants, and I act like I am going to kiss him. But I grab his keys and I throw them out the passenger window. He starts to yell at me and I tell him he better go find his keys before a train comes. I get out and walk down the railroad spur which ends right at the main highway right across the highway from the truck stop where the restaurant is. I was meeting my friends. I tell them what happened and they were not happy. They all want to go mess with Connor, but I tell them to wait a while. Later, after we have all eaten and wasted some time chatting with truckers and restaurant employees, in comes Connor. And he begs everyone to come help him find his keys. Everyone refuses and he ends up calling his dad. But it turns out he doesn't have extra keys to his truck. His dad was able to tow his truck off of the tracks, but he couldn't tow it home at night. Connor spent several hours on Saturday in the ditch looking for his keys. I think he may have borrowed a metal detector, I'm not sure though, but he eventually found his keys. My friends at the restaurant found other ways to mess with Connor and his truck. I never bothered with him after that night, but I heard all about my friends messing with him right up until he was arrested at the restaurant. If anyone is interested, I will share those stories later. Story 5. Made a history exam harder for my ex without him knowing. Disclaimer, I'm not from the US. So when I was about to finish school, my ex-BF broke up with me. It was preceded by ignoring me for a few months. We met at school every day, but he didn't talk to me, avoided me after classes and ghosted me online, and generally acted as if I didn't exist, only giving me a couple of looks through the entire day, and finally forbidding me to get a haircut and dumping me because fortunately I wasn't stupid enough to fulfill his demand and got the damn haircut. But as I was a teenager, this attitude still hurt. My mom works in our school. She was a history teacher when we were graduating. Because it's a state school where all students pass all the exams even when it means some shady stuff is allowed, the teachers would be punished if someone had to retake. Every classmate of mine only memorized the answer to one question preferred by them and didn't study hard for others. The history exam was oral and you got all the answers prior in a special book to memorize, but you weren't supposed to know what questions you were going to get. My mom was on the committee of 3 teachers present at the exam. The show begins. 10 minutes before the exam starts, our history teacher comes to the room we're waiting in and says the principal has just come to the exam room and mixed the question cards on the table, so no hope for getting the question you've prepared for, you're not going to know where your number is. The same second I get a text message from my mom telling me where my question is placed. And we're going to the exam room in alphabetical order with me being the second on the list and the first person not being my ex. X goes wild and frantically asks me to announce what question I got after I pass the exam and return to the rest of my classmates. Turns out he's learned me question best and hopes I'm not getting it = wants to assess his chances after I come back, because once the question is answered, other students aren't getting it. He doesn't know I'm absolutely getting the question as I planned. I smile and wish him luck. I go to the exam room, take my question because I know exactly where it lies, nail it, return to the rest and announce that I'm very sorry, but the god of Chinese random seems to have abandoned him and it's not my fault. He is furious. He throws his backpack through the entire room, swears and shouts, while I finally feel like I was granted the blessing of the god of pettiness. As I said, all students always pass, but this was much more stressful than he expected and mom later told me that he knew almost nothing, his answer was shitty and he didn't really deserve the grade he got. I'm already 22 and I'm still pleased, although this story didn't even have any significant impact on X. Seeing him so anxious and pissed was beautiful though. Story 6. Manager with a chip on shoulder. Way back in the day I used to work at Old Navy when they would have us wear uniforms and headsets. Most of the managers were cool, except for Angie the head manager. One day she comes in and just has a major attitude. Huffs and puffs around the store. I think I'm pretty nice so I sincerely ask her, "Are you okay?" She just gives me the death stare. "I'm okay. Sorry." As I go back to folding the shirts, she comes on the headset and begins to tell everyone to mind their business and I knew she was trying to bitch me out to all of the employees, so I just pressed the transmitter button on my headset which cancelled hers out. I kept repetitively pressing the button until I stopped hearing her voice. No one knew what she was trying to say and no one cared to ask. Small victories. That's all for today. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.